Life, as I knew it, was comfortably predictable. My days were filled with the mundane tasks of work, social engagements, and the occasional foray into hobbies that kept the monotony at bay. This predictable existence was upended one chilly October evening when I stumbled upon an old, leather-bound journal at a quaint, roadside antique shop during a weekend getaway. Drawn to its aged cover and the mystery of its contents, I felt an inexplicable compulsion to purchase it. The shopkeeper, a wizened old man with knowing eyes, hesitated for a moment before handing it over. His parting words, "Be careful. Some things are better left undisturbed," echoing in my mind as I left. The first few nights after bringing the journal home were restless, filled with vivid dreams of shadowy figures whispering in a language I couldn't understand. I chalked it up to the excitement of my find, but the unease persisted, growing with each passing day. It started with small, easily dismissed occurrences, a cold draft in a room with closed windows, the faint sound of footsteps in the empty hallway, and pages of the journal turning on their own. I rationalized these incidents as tricks of the mind, the product of an overactive imagination fueled by the shopkeeper's ominous warning. However, the events soon escalated beyond what could easily be dismissed. The whispers became voices, calling my name with a clarity that sent shivers down my spine. Shadows moved with purpose, coalescing into forms that were gone when I dared to look directly at them. Objects began to move, rearranged by unseen hands, and the feeling of being watched became a constant presence, suffocating in its intensity. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I delved into the journal, searching for answers among its cryptic entries. What I found were references to rituals, spirits, and a haunting that stretched back centuries, tied to the very pages I now held. The novelty of the journal's discovery quickly gave way to an undercurrent of unease that began to permeate my home. At first, the incidents were easy to dismiss as mere coincidences or the product of an overly tired mind. However, as days passed, the occurrences grew increasingly difficult to rationalize away. One evening, while settled in the dim comfort of my living room, the first truly unnerving incident occurred. The journal lay open on my coffee table, a beacon in the soft glow of the lamp. As I reached for my cup of tea, the pages fluttered as if caught in a gust of wind. Yet the windows were firmly closed, and the air was still. A chill ran down my spine as I watched, paralyzed, the pages stopping as abruptly as they had started, revealing an entry I had not seen before, an ominous warning about awakening what lies dormant. Sleep became elusive, with every creak of the old house setting my heart racing. Shadows seemed to linger in the corners of my vision, darting away when I turned to look. The whispers at night grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to echo from the walls themselves, speaking in urgent tones I could not understand. One night, I awoke to the sensation of being watched. The air in my bedroom felt charged, heavy with anticipation. In the corner, the shadows seemed deeper, almost alive. I blinked, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing there, watching me. But when I looked again, it was gone, leaving only the lingering feeling of dread and the faint sound of retreating footsteps. The physical manifestations began soon after. Objects started to move with purpose, defying explanation. A vase of flowers I had placed in the center of the dining table was found shattered on the kitchen floor, its pieces scattered as if thrown in anger. The journal, which I had taken to closing and placing in a drawer each night, was repeatedly found open on the table each morning. Its pages turned to new warnings and tales of sorrow. The isolation set in as my preoccupation with the journal and its phenomena consumed me. Friends expressed concern over my withdrawn demeanor and the dark circles under my eyes. But how could I explain the unexplainable? I found myself avoiding their calls, retreating further into my research in the increasingly oppressive atmosphere of my home. In desperation, I turned to the internet, scouring forums and websites for any mention of the journal's symbols or references to its previous owners. My search led me to tales of a family from the 1800s. Known for their occult practices and tragic end, the journal was rumored to have belonged to them, a record of their dealings with the supernatural, and, perhaps, a catalyst for their downfall. As the haunting grew in intensity, So did my resolve to find a solution. The entity, if that's what it had become, was not merely a passive presence, but an active participant in the terror that filled my nights. It was no longer content to whisper from the shadows. It began to show itself. Apparitions appeared with increasing clarity. Spectral figures that roamed the halls, their faces twisted in expressions of anguish and rage. One particularly harrowing encounter left me with no doubt of the entity's power. I awoke to find my room ice cold, my breath visible in the air. At the foot of my bed stood a figure, its form more solid than any apparition I had seen before. It stared at me with eyes that burned with an internal light, and I could feel its anger like a physical force. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls themselves resonating with the entity's fury. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to scream, until it vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The entity's manifestations left no room for doubt. I was dealing with a force far beyond my understanding, one that demanded action. My home, once a sanctuary, had become a battleground where shadows waged war against the light, and each night brought with it a new terror. It was clear that mere research and passive observation would not suffice. I needed to take decisive action, driven by a mixture of fear and determination. I began to seek out those who might help me confront this entity. My search led me to a local medium known for her expertise in the paranormal. Her reputation bolstered by testimonials of hauntings resolved and spirits appeased. Skeptical but desperate, I arranged for her to visit my home. Her arrival marked a turning point. The medium, a woman of indeterminate age with an aura of calm authority, stepped into my home and immediately sensed the presence that had tormented me. She spoke of a darkness that had anchored itself to the physical world. Drawn by the energies contained within the journal, her plan was to perform a ritual, one that would sever the entity's ties to my home and banish it back to the realm from which it had come. The ritual was set for the night of the new moon, a time when the veil between worlds is thinnest, and the power of such entities is at its weakest. We prepared meticulously, arranging candles in a circle around the journal, which lay open at the center. The medium's chants filled the air, a resonant melody that seemed to push back against the creeping shadows. As the ritual reached its climax, the air in the room grew charged, a tangible pressure that made it difficult to breathe. The candles flickered wildly, as if caught in an unseen storm. Then, without warning, the entity made its presence known. A howl filled the room, a sound of rage and despair that shook the very walls. The temperature plummeted, breath turning to mist in the air. As the shadows coalesced into a form both terrifying and pitiful, a figure trapped between worlds, its features twisted by anger and sorrow. The medium's chants grew louder, more insistent. She called to the entity, offering it release, urging it towards the light that now began to filter through the gloom. For a moment, it seemed as if the entity would relent, its form beginning to dissipate. But then, with a violence that sent us reeling, the entity lashed out. The candles were snuffed out, plunging us into darkness. A force unseen but immensely powerful hurled objects across the room, and the medium was thrown to the ground, perchance silenced. The chaos lasted only moments, but it felt like an eternity before the light returned, revealing a room in disarray and the journal, its pages now blank, lying innocently at the center of the shattered circle. In the days that followed, a deceptive calm settled over the house. The medium, recovering from her injuries, assured me that the entity had been weakened, if not entirely banished. She warned me, however, that such entities are not easily defeated and that vigilance would be necessary. I clung to the hope that the worst was over, that the ritual had at least brought me some respite from the relentless haunting. The shadows seemed less oppressive. The whispers had faded, and for the first time in weeks, I dared to hope for a return to normalcy. But as the narrative of our lives often proves, hope is a fragile thing, easily shattered. One evening, as I sat reflecting on the events that had appended my once peaceful existence, I noticed something that chilled me to my core. The journal, which I had locked away after the ritual, lay open on my coffee table. Its pages, previously blank, now bore a single message, written in the same looping script as the original entries. You cannot bind what does not wish to be bound. You cannot banish what considers this its home. The realization that the entity might not only still be with me, but possibly empowered by the failed ritual sent a wave of dread crashing over me. The medium's warnings echoed in my mind, a prescient reminder of the battle that might still lie ahead.